All right, everybody, welcome to the latest version of the Beating Diabetes class presented by Chancy Drugs. My name is Stephen Ansel. I'm a fourth year pharmacy student at the University of Georgia, and I'm going to be talking to you guys today about continuous glucose monitoring, an exciting topic. So just to go over the agenda for today, what we're going to be talking about, we're going to go over the basics of continuous glucose monitoring. And for those of you who have tuned into some of these classes before, this will give a little refresher about continuous glucose monitoring and what it's all about. You all will probably be pretty familiar with it already. And for those of you who have not tuned in before, welcome. And we'll go over a little bit of the basics of CGM, what it is, how it's different from fingerstick glucose monitoring. And what we want to do today is we want to go over the ways to make the most out of your CGM device and how you can make the most out of your readings and how you can use that on your journey with diabetes to help control your glucose. And we'll have time for questions and discussion. I know it's recorded, but you can always reach out to us if you have any questions about the device or the monitoring or anything like that. So to go over some basics of CGM, I know this is kind of a busy picture right here, but it does really illustrate all the differences because although the two, fingerstick blood glucose monitoring, the more traditional method, and then this continuous glucose monitoring are measuring technically the same thing, there's a lot of differences between the two. And a lot of those differences are what make the continuous glucose monitoring systems, such as the Freestyle Libres, the Dexcom systems, things like that. A lot of those differences are what make those beneficial, and they kind of explain why certain patients like the continuous glucose monitoring systems over the more traditional fingerstick method. So for those of you that already have a CGM device, such as a Freestyle, I want you to just take a second to think about, since you got your device, what kind of changes you've made in your day-to-day lifestyle, some of the dietary choices you make, and how you manage your diabetes now that you have this device, versus thinking back to when you were doing finger sticks on a daily basis, how that fit into your daily life and your glucose monitoring. So one of the biggest things that patients say about this is you don't have to do finger sticks anymore. And we know how much of a hassle the finger stick method is. They hurt your fingers, you get scars on your fingers. Sometimes the blood doesn't stop. You got to put Band-Aids on. And it can be a real pain to have to do it, to have to take time out of your day to go and stick your finger before you eat, after you eat, things like that. So the advantage here, for those of you that don't know, the Libre device is this little white circle there on the screen. That is actually the device that goes onto your arm. That's the sensor. And that sensor just has a tiny little filament on the end that goes not into your bloodstream, but into your, it's called your interstitial fluid. So that's the fluid that hangs around under your skin, outside of your blood vessels. And we typically think of glucose as hanging out in the bloodstream, like we see in this diagram here. But the glucose can also hang out in that interstitial fluid. So that's where the Freestyle is actually monitoring your glucose from. So because of that, you don't have to do the finger sticks anymore. There's no blood involved whatsoever. And even though there is something that's underneath your skin, really you never hear of people really saying that it hurts. A lot of people don't even feel it when the sensor is applied. So it's painless. It hangs out there. You won't feel it while it's being worn. And another thing, it automatically monitors your glucose every 15 minutes. So there's no need to take the time to go and do the finger sticks and get out your test strips and the whole thing. It's constantly monitoring your glucose. And even while you're sleeping, your glucose is still being monitored. So you really get a full picture of what it means to what your blood glucose is doing throughout the day and throughout the night. Another advantage, you can scan it anywhere. So with this device, you either have the reader device that's shown here, or if you have a smartphone, use the app and you can just simply run it over your sensor at any time of the day, and it'll scan it. It'll tell you exactly what your glucose reading is for that moment in time. So in this picture right here, they scanned their sensor on their arm. Their glucose was 112 and it's trending upwards. So for whatever reason, they may have just eaten. Something is making their glucose go up a little bit, and that's their reading. And it's as simple as that. There's no more sticking, nothing like that goes into it. So as you can see, there's a lot of small differences between the CGM and the traditional method that in a lot of ways make the CGM monitoring a lot more advantageous for patients. So as I said before, there's some differences. I want you to take a moment and look at this diagram and think about the things that we just went over, and then interpret it into what this picture is showing you. So as we said, the CGM, because it is taking your glucose throughout the whole day, it's giving you a full picture of what your glucose has been doing throughout the day. Whereas Fingersticks, as opposed to being a full picture, is more of just a snapshot in time of what your glucose is. And because of that, you are getting insight of where you're at a certain time of the day, but you don't get the trends of which direction it's headed. And it's hard to see, oh, my glucose is high right now. Has it been high all day? Is it coming down at the moment? Is it on its way up even higher? A lot of things like that you don't get with the Fingerstick method, you can get with your CGM. So what this picture is showing you here, what I'm trying to illustrate, is that on the left, say this is the same patient and it's the same exact times of the day and everything. It looks like they're doing pretty good. Their glucose is in range. It never goes into the high zone. It never goes low. It looks like they've really been taking care of their sugars and everything's good. Nothing crazy to report. But looking at the full picture over here on the right, you can see that those Fingersticks only tell a portion of the story. So yeah, the times during the day when they stuck their finger, their glucose was in range, but there were times of the day when it went higher, like in the morning, maybe they ate a big breakfast and it spiked up and they didn't stick their finger until a little bit after. And then there were times during the day when it actually dipped low, and maybe the patient was feeling a little lightheaded, a little dizzy, and they didn't really know why, because the last time they checked their sugars, the sugars were in range. So that's one of the things that the CGM does really well, is that it lets you see your whole journey throughout the day, and it can really help you correlate how you feel throughout the day with how your blood sugars are actually reading. And another thing, you can really keep track of how your body responds to certain things. So as I said before, this morning they woke up, sugar was pretty low, they ate a big breakfast, it spiked up. You can see that whole spike, that whole rise right after breakfast, and you can see it fall back down. You can line it up with your medication administrations if you forgot to take your morning medications, or if you gave yourself a dose of insulin later in the day, you can see that glucose fall back down. So really, there's a lot of things that you can see with these monitors that you can't see otherwise. And also, it could very well be the opposite for somebody else, where they're taking their Fingersticks throughout the day and the glucose is out of range. But maybe, according to their chart, they're just taking it at the wrong time. They're taking their glucose right after they eat. It's right at the peak, and most of the rest of the day they're spending in range. So it really does help to illustrate a full day with that continuous monitor. Another advantage that we have here with these devices is the ability to set high and low alarms. And if any of you have these devices already, you probably know about these alarms. It makes you set them when you set them up, but you can also change the levels at which the alarms will go off if you want to. So this really is a great way to avoid a potential emergency. Hopefully the alarm hasn't gone off for many of you, but if it has, uh, think back about when you heard those alarms, and if it was a high alarm, if it was a low alarm, and what you were feeling at the time, and if those feelings linked up to when this alarm went off. So, for example, everybody is different as far as what levels might make them feel like they're having a low blood sugar episode, or which ones make them feel like they're having a high sugar episode. So I believe it sets it around 80 for your low level is what it automatically sets to. Now, for a lot of people around 80, you might start feeling those symptoms of low blood sugar. But for others that might just have a lower blood sugar throughout the day, 80 might really not be something too out of the ordinary. And so for somebody like that, if that alarm's going off all the time, it might be time to reevaluate where that alarm is set. I also want you to think about, if you've had that alarm, or if you're not familiar with these devices, if you just have a episode of low blood sugar and you know your sugar's low, I want you to take a minute to think about what you do next when that happens and how you move forward. So if it is a truly low level, say that you have your notifications turned on, your alarm goes off, you say, oh man, my sugar's going down. I'm starting to feel a little funny. I'm starting to feel dizzy. I think I need to sit down. What's that next step that you take? We like to think about it as far as getting your blood sugar back up, and they call it the rule of 15. So what that means is you want to get 15 grams of carbs, and you want to recheck your levels in 15 minutes. So that 15 grams of carbs, it's a lot easier to just think about it in a simpler term. So 15 grams of carbs is about 4 or so ounces of orange juice, something like that. So just a half a glass of orange juice is about 15 grams of carbs. A tablespoon of sugar or honey or syrup, something like that, that quick sugar is what you're looking for to get your level back up. And you want to recheck it in 15 minutes. Now, before, you'd have to be fumbling around with the stick in your finger, getting the test strips out, doing all that while you're feeling a little dizzy, and really you just want to concentrate on getting your level back up. With the CGM device, it's automatically checking for you, so you can monitor your level going back up, and you want to make sure you get it back up to a level where you feel good. And ideally you want to raise it about 50 units after that 15 grams of carbs. So if it was at 80 beforehand, you want to be around around 130 afterwards to make sure you're back in level and get everything reoriented. One of the tricks with this is, as we saw before, it gives you a number and it gives you an arrow of which direction you're trending. So if that alarm goes off and you scan it and it says it's on its way down, it's time to take action. It's time to get you some glucose, get you some orange juice, some honey, some glucose tablets if you have them. Now's the time for that. But if the alarm goes off, you check it, the arrow might be climbing back up, you don't feel dizzy, you don't feel out of the ordinary. In that situation, it may be okay just to confirm that feeling with the finger stick and make sure that the reader is reading right, and just confirm that what you're feeling matches what your actual level is. And I don't think I mentioned it in that first slide, but one of the things with this measuring your interstitial fluid versus your blood is it does lag behind a little bit. So what your CGM device is reading lags by about 2.5 minutes behind what a finger stick would read. So if the if your device tells you, your sugar's low, but it's trending up, and you check the blood and it is in fact going up, it's, in the hundreds or something at that point, then you should be good. That confirms what you're looking for. So the thing with these, because we want to use them to their full capabilities, it is important to check that trend, because the trend is something that you don't get from anything else. You get the trend from your CGM device. So when that alarm goes off, we want to check the trend, see what's going on, and see if we need to take action, because having that alarm go off before something bad happens is it's very important, and it can really help you avoid some kind of emergency that you might not see coming otherwise. So moving on to the next little tip, to know, sometimes you might get a reading like that where it says it's low, it says it's super high, and what you're feeling doesn't really match what your reader is saying. So in a situation like that, you might think, is my sensor malfunctioning, or am I actually having some kind of crazy reading here? So one of the things to consider first is any sudden activity or dietary changes that may have happened in the last day or so. So an example that we've heard is, for somebody who was wearing a CGM device. They were a truck driver. So on a daily basis, most of their time was spent sitting down in a truck, not a whole lot of activity. But that's what their body was used to, is sitting for a long time. And your body gets used to the way that you do things after a little while. So this certain individual, they drove a truck every day. And then one weekend, they decided that it was time to do a little work on their roof and in their gutters. So they got up on the roof, were doing some work. We all know how hot it is out there right now. And they were sweating, getting dehydrated, probably didn't eat enough for breakfast that morning, and were feeling exhausted. And their reader was just going crazy because their body was being put through something that it wasn't really used to. And so it's important in that situation to think about, okay, is my sensor actually malfunctioning, or am I doing something that would cause my readings to actually be out of the ordinary? So in most cases, if it's not a super low blood sugar emergency where you need to drink orange juice and try to get yourself back up, if it's just a little bit of an abnormal level, it's important not to panic. You just want to give it time and go back to your normal activity schedule. And after a few hours, if it's not regulated, then maybe you can start to consider that maybe the device is reading incorrectly. But if you've given it time, after a couple hours, it's your glucose is going back in range, then it's probably fine. It was just your body reacting to new activity or a different dietary style than you're used to. But it does happen occasionally, where maybe the sensor wasn't quite on right, or some heat or some water may have gotten to it, and it may not be completely working right. So in that case, if you have a Freestyle device, Freestyle does have a direct line to their customer care team. I have it on here. You can take a picture of that number. It should be on the box of your device and your sensors and everything. And you can call that number, and they should be able to help you out and hopefully get you a new sensor pretty quickly and get you squared away, because accidents and things like that do happen. And so one of the things to consider as well, we've had some questions about how waterproof is this actual device, because one of the things, you put it on and then you go 14 days, 2 weeks, and just pretty much forget about it, and it's there and it's working and it's doing its thing. But it's safe to shower with, and it is rated to be able to swim with. They say 30 minutes in the pool at no deeper than 3 feet. And so that's what it was tested at. That's what it should work at. But as we know, things happen. And if maybe the seal around the skin wasn't completely sealed up before you get in the water, it is possible that water could get in there and mess that up. So if something like that happens, it's important to get that replaced as soon as you can. All right. Our next topic here, we're going to talk about the scanning that I mentioned before. So one of the things with these freestyle devices is that the sensor on your arm, is shown here, it only stores 8 hours at a time of data. So it's monitoring your glucose around the clock, but the device on your arm can only store it for about 8 hours at a time. So it is important to get in a good habit of scanning your device, either with your reader, the little blue reader that came with it, or if you use the phone app to scan it with your phone, as much as you can remember. And you want to at least do it every 8 hours, but it's good to get in the habit of doing it more often, so you're more likely to remember it. And as we said before, you want the full picture, right? You don't just want little snippets with information missing. We want to get the full picture, so it is important to scan as much as you can. So if you scan your device, your smartphone or your reader can hold a lot more. I think it holds 3 months at a time of information. So you want to just be pulling that from your sensor as much as you can, so your sensor can continue to build new data for you. So if you want to line it up with meals, that's a great way to do it. Anytime you sit down for a meal, just go ahead and scan it, see what your level is, see how much room you have to work with on this next meal. And it's important to scan it before bedtime and then when you get up, so you have that full picture throughout the night as well. All right, so let's get into some of the numbers here. One thing I will say is that numbers themselves are not good or bad. Not using the numbers is what can lead to good or bad outcomes. So you have all these numbers at your disposal, and what you choose to do with them is what can lead to good or bad outcomes for yourself. So you want to use the numbers that you get from your device as a guide to learn how your body responds to things. Like I said before, you can really start to learn, oh, I eat this during the day, my glucose does this. I eat this during the day, it does this instead. I go for a walk and my glucose goes up and then it comes down. There's a lot that you can really learn from really paying attention to these numbers. But the numbers themselves, they're really not good or bad. They're just information for you to use. So on this screen, for example, we have the number 112, which is your glucose reading. So by itself, I want you to just think in your head, is that a good number or a bad number? Most of the time, we would say that is a good number, but like I said, it depends. Now, if that number was 180 or 200, good or bad? Well, it's hard to say. That's a number that we usually think of as being a little high, but if it's 200 and it's coming down from a really bad high, then 200 might not be so bad if it's on its way down. So that's something to think about. And then we also think about, A1C is another number that comes up a lot when you're talking about diabetes. So A1C of, let's say, 9, good or bad? Usually that's a little bit high. That's when we start talking about different things we can do to lower that. A1C of 7, generally thought of as pretty good. But we'll see on this next screen, these are 3 patients here that all have an A1C of 7. We'll call patient A over here, we'll call him Albert. He's got an A1C of 7. Patient B, Ms. Barbara, she also has an A1C of 7. And then Carl over here, patient C, he has an A1C of 7. So according to their A1Cs, they're all doing great. They're all managing their diabetes just fine, taking their meds as directed, managing their diet. But when we get the full picture with their CGM device, we see a different story. So looking at Albert over here, patient A, we see that 7% A1C, but then we also see this green, which correlates to him being in his target range of 70 to 180 throughout the day. So he spends 100% of his day in between. So when we're looking at his his chart, his CGM chart right here. Instead of dipping into the red and going up into the yellow like this person was doing, he is just spending all day going back and forth in this range right here. So he's making good dietary choices. He's eating things that aren't making his sugar spike too high. He's eating when he needs to eat, so his sugars aren't dipping too low. If he's on insulin, he's dosing that appropriately to where his sugars aren't dipping too low after a meal. So he's doing good. He's making good choices at his meals. He's doing what needs to be done, and he's doing well from that, as we can see. Now, Miss Barbara, 7% A1C, looks good on paper, but her day looks a little bit different than Mr. Alberts does. So she's still spending a good deal of time in range, but some of the choices that she makes throughout the day are leading her to be spending time either above or below that target range for certain portions of the day as well. So a day for Miss Barbara, probably, I wouldn't say it looks like this one. This one looks more like a Carl to me, but she may be spending a little bit of time here in the morning in the target range, and then forgetting to eat breakfast, being in a hurry on the way to work. Her sugar might dip a little bit. And then she gets to lunchtime. She knows, oh, I'm hungry. I can feel my sugar's a little low. I was feeling, I didn't have a lot of energy this morning. So she goes to Chick-fil-A and gets herself a big lunch, and those fries and that fried chicken and that Coke, it causes her to spend a good deal of time spiking above her target range for the rest of the day. And then as she comes down back into range, maybe she decides, oh, I had a big lunch, I might have some smaller portions at dinner, and she finishes out in range and goes to bed. Now, for her, she still spent a good bit of the time in range, but some of those choices that she made around lunchtime caused her to spike above. And if she were to have scanned with her freestyle device before that meal, and she could see, oh, well, I'm in the hundreds already, maybe I need to go with a grilled chicken sandwich or something at lunch. Things like that can really help patients like Barbara start looking a little more like Albert as far as her CGM graph goes. And then you have patients, you have the Carls. So his A1C, once again, it looks good. It looks like it should, but as we can see from his CGM readings, it tells a whole different story. So you might look at this and say, well, his sugar's so high 58% of the time, how is his A1C still at 7? So what the A1C is telling you is that on average, his glucose is around 154. So obviously it's not going to stay at 154 for much time at all at that single value, but over time, those ups and downs, they all average out to about 154. So we can see that he is spending a lot of time over that 154. Over half the time, he's over that. But then his time spent low, probably feeling pretty rough, pretty bad, actually makes up for that, and it makes his number look good. But the CGM tells us that that's really not the right way to look at it. So somebody like Mr. Carl, he's probably making some choices throughout the day that he's not making them based on thinking about how can I keep my sugar in range. He's just making decisions. He's going to the gas station in the morning before work. He's getting a coffee and he's dumping 4 packs of sugar in it, and maybe a honey bun for breakfast. So he's starting off with a lot of sugar in his system. And you can see he spends half his day above that mark. So he has that big spike in the morning, and then it comes crashing down around lunchtime. He's feeling rough. He thinks it's just from, working pretty hard throughout the day, but really his sugar's crashing. He eats a big lunch. He might go down to the Smoking Pig and say, well, I'm gonna have something a little healthy today since I had that honey bun for breakfast. And he gets the smoking pig salad bar. And we all know there's some choices that can be made at that salad bar that can be good or bad. So he makes the right decision to get the salad bar, but he dumps a bunch of ranch dressing all over his salad. And that sugar just goes right back up. So has finishes that for lunch, goes home, doesn't eat much dinner, but then has a big dessert. And that's where you see at the tail end of this, it's going back up right before he goes to bed, leaving his body to try to work that out throughout the rest of the night. Now, his A1C is 7, but we can see he spent a lot of time out of range throughout the day. And he probably felt it too, spending that much time below range. He probably felt a lot of signs of low blood sugar and maybe didn't even really realize it. So all that being said, to just further illustrate how this continuous monitoring is really great, because we get a full picture of what your glucose is doing throughout the day. And you can use that as much or as little as you want. Obviously, we really encourage you to take the information that it gives you and really use it to make choices throughout the day about your meals, about your exercise. And a lot of people that I've talked to that have these devices actually find it to be pretty fun to try to see, how much of the day can I spend inside my range? What can I do to spend the most time in that range? And how can the choices that I make on a daily basis, my breakfast, my lunch, my afternoon walk, how can all these affect how much time I'm spending in that range? And when you use it like that and you start to see good results, it's exciting to go to your doctor's appointment every month or every 3 months, however often you go, and show them, hey, look, I've had this device. I've been making some good decisions with it. And let's check my A1C. Let's see where I'm at this month. So it's very exciting to be able to use this and really apply it to your day-to-day life. So some final thoughts before we get out of here. Just want to emphasize again, it really is all about the choices that are made. You can make good choices with all the information that you get, or you can make bad choices. You're going to get a lot of numbers from it. And what you do with those numbers can really affect your long-term diabetes management. And as we said, we get a full picture with this. And it's really important to make sure that you're scanning enough and you're taking enough readings. You're making sure that your reader is charged so that you can keep scanning it throughout the day, because we want a full picture and we want to really be able to see your full line and be able to track it throughout the day and link it up to your choices and help you make some better choices throughout the day. All right, everybody. I think that's about all I have for you today. Feel free to reach out to any of us here at Chancy Drugs if you have any questions about continuous glucose monitoring. If you're interested in trying to get a device, if you don't have one already, I would highly encourage you to reach out to us and see what we can do to help you get one. And I hope you all have a great rest of your day. Thank you so much.